Hey there, Christophe from the French Herbal. Let's talk about a pretty little plant making pretty little flowers. Its name is Cowslip, and you will find it just about everywhere in France and in many countries around the world. It displays its gorgeous little yellow flowers in the spring, and you can make a pretty good home remedy out of it. The flowers as well as the roots are medicinal, and you guessed it, in this episode, it's all about cowslip. But before we start, a quick but important reminder: I am not a doctor, pharmacist, or a licensed healthcare professional. The information shared in this episode is for educational and informational purposes only, not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any condition, and it does not replace professional medical care. Let's start with a bit of botanical information. Cowslip is a perennial plant that belongs to the Primulaceae, the primrose family. In France, we call it Primevère coucou or just cuckoo, because it shows up around the time you hear the first cuckoo of the year. Its Latin name is Primula veris. Primula comes from the Latin prima, which means first, and veris means spring. So the first one of spring. It's one of the very first flowers we see appearing in our countryside. And we are very happy to see it. You know, the yellow flowers make us think that of the sun and the good days ahead. Quick note for my American listeners: in the US, the name cowslip is sometimes used for marsh marigold, Caltha palustris, which is a completely different plant and a toxic one. Also note that there are a lot of ornamental primroses out there in all kinds of colors. Here we're talking specifically about Primula veris. That's the one that was used in our tradition. So don't confuse it with other primroses. Stick to the Latin name, Primula veris. Learn to identify it in nature and you should be fine. Our dear Paul-Victor Fournier, a French botanist who left us some beautiful work on herbal remedies, reminds us that some primrose species are toxic. On the other hand, some of them, like oxlip, Primula elatior, can probably be used the same way as Primula veris. Fournier also mentions Primula ecolis, the common primrose or the garden primrose, because that's generally the one you'll see in gardens as ornamental, probably have the same properties, right? And that one in the garden is also called Primula vulgaris. But okay, let's keep it simple. For the rest of this discussion, we will stick to Primula veris. It's the safest route. It's the plant you'll find in herb stores, at least in France anyway. You won't see it during the winter. It goes dormant. But toward the end of the winter, you'll see a rosette of leaves appear. They're light green. They have that crinkled look to them, and they lie flat on the ground. Then a stem will come up from the center of the rosette and produce a cluster of flowers, all attached at the same point. The yellow petals are fused, and you will see 5 orange spots on the petals arranged all around the flower. It's really beautiful. The calyx is tube-shaped, so that's the green part of the flower. And to put it in non-botanical terms, the flower looks like a little yellow trumpet speckled with orange sitting inside a green tube. Marie-Antoinette Mulot, a famous herbalist of the past in France, tells us that we go pick cowslips just like we go pick daffodils. And by doing so, we bring a bit of spring into our homes. So where exactly do we go to pick cowslip? Well, in meadows, in pastures, along paths, in forest clearings from the lowlands up to the mountains. It's not very common where I live in Provence. It's way too hot, but I do manage to find some, and I have to go looking in cool and shaded spots because it doesn't handle hot and dry very well. I have also grown it in the garden for many years. It's really beautiful. I keep it in a shaded area and I water it on a regular basis. The parts used are the flowers and the roots, and the two are different remedies. Okay, more on that in a few minutes. Now let's move on to properties and indications. And to do so, we need to do a bit of historical background. When it comes to the use of cowslip in the old herbals, well, we don't find much in the ancient civilizations. I had been told that it's probably because it doesn't grow in Greece or Italy, so obviously we're not going to find much in the old Greek and Roman writings, which are the basis of European practice. But actually, as Fournier explains, the common primrose does grow in those countries. So why no mention at all? Actually, we're not really sure. Later, it will be mentioned in medieval writings, and Hildegard of Bingen talks about it for melancholy. And here we should understand a certain state of sadness. She also mentions it for much more serious situations like apoplexy, which is an old medical term for a stroke or paralysis. In fact, it used to be called palsy wort. On the French side, it gets a good kick in the pants in the 1800s with Cazin, one of our famous countryside doctors, who figures the plant could just disappear from our herbal knowledge and nobody would miss it. I'm guessing he tried it without success. And then finally, in the 1900s, we see a very clear renewal of interest in certain hospitals and from certain doctors for lung-related applications, and we'll come back to that very soon. It's not a well-known medicinal plant today, and that's a real shame because it's very present in our ecosystems and it's very useful for all winter complaints that hit the bronchial tubes. A quick pause to let you know that you can grab my free ebook on preparing herbal teas for the 4 seasons. It's full of simple recipes and blends you can make with herbs you can buy or even grow almost anywhere. The link is right below this episode. I hope you enjoy it. But before we talk about bronchial tubes, let's talk about the nervous system. The flowers are useful here, not the roots. The flowers will gently work to calm down the nervous system. On the English side, here is what Maud Grieve tells us about cowslip flowers. Maud Grieve, if you don't know her, is a woman who did some admirable work in the early 1900s, and she wrote a book called A Modern Herbal. Amazing book. And let me tell you, for the early 1900s, that was definitely modern, what she did. And above all, it's a remarkable encyclopedic work on plants. On the subject of cowslip, Grieve tells us that in olden time it was much appreciated remedy for strengthening the nervous and the cerebral functions and for relieving restlessness and insomnia. So what does that all mean? Why would we go and strengthen the nervous function when we are already stressed, for instance? Aren't we going to make things worse? Actually, not at all. What we need to understand here is that when we've pulled on the rope a little too hard, when we've been stressed for a certain period of time, at some point the nervous system takes the hit. Physically, you can feel very tired, and emotionally, you can feel very fragile, right? It's as if all of a sudden the nervous system doesn't have enough resources, enough energy to cope. That's when strengthening the nervous system is useful, right? To give the nervous system a certain energy again, but a more stable one this time. You can also picture the different phases of stress. Before exhaustion, there is overexcitation. And cowslip here has a calming, anxiolytic, sedative effect in phases of acute stress. You can combine cowslip flowers to maybe orange blossom flowers, hawthorn flowers, linden flowers, German chamomile flowers. Actually, you could make a beautiful tea blend with flowers only, one that brings a very gentle, very floral, cooling energy to the nervous system. Maud Greaves talks about cowslip for headaches too, and she puts it on the same level as wood betony from that point of view. And in fact, that's a use we find on the French side as well, with an indication for migraines of nervous origin. In that situation, we could combine cowslip flowers and wood betony flowering tops. Very good. You will see cowslip flowers in blends meant to help with restless sleep. And here again, we would combine it to other plants that have a mildly sedative action, maybe sweet woodruff, linden flowers again, bird's foot trefoil. We talked about that plant in a past episode. All right, so now that we have a good overview of using the flowers, let's talk about the roots. And the first time I harvested the roots, I was really surprised by how aromatic and strong they are. And the roots have a particular affinity for the bronchial tubes. We're going to make a tincture out of them that will be the best extraction for the aromatics, although in the past, people used a decoction of the roots. I recommend using fresh roots if you have high proof alcohol. You could also make a tincture from the recently dried roots. And as I said, you could also make a decoction of the roots. Water extraction will be a little less effective, but it will work. The effect will be expectorant, and it's an action that seems to happen through substances we call saponins. Saponins make you think of soap, and that's intentional because these are substances that make water foam. We find a lot of saponin in soapwort, which is well known for its surfactant properties. The thinking is that saponins, which are irritating to the digestive system, will also go and irritate the respiratory tract. And the thinking here is that this irritation gets communicated from the stomach to the lungs. These two organs are connected by the same nerve, the vagus nerve, which used to be called the pneumogastric nerve, a name that had the advantage of reminding us that the lungs and the digestive tract are connected. Picture those saponins irritating the stomach lining. That irritation gets communicated by the nervous system to the lungs, which receive that irritation signal and wake up. Right? It's like a little kick when you're a bit tired. It wakes you up. The result is expectoration, something that's very welcome at the end of an infection like bronchitis, when the person no longer has the strength to bring up that waste. So there's stagnation, and that's not good at all. You can also use that effect during the peak of the lung infection. That's possible, to help the lung clear up waste, but it's more useful toward the end in a healthy person, right? If the person has weak lungs and weak immunity, then it would be better to start right away with the herbal expectorants. Okay, we can also use cowslip roots externally as a decoction. In the French tradition, we see it used for contusions and bruises, a little bit like arnica. People also used to prepare an oil infusion with the flowers and use it for skin inflammation, small scrapes, and burns. Let's talk about forms and quantities now. Here are some instructions from Dr. Valnet, a great practitioner from the 1960s to the 1980s in France. A tea of the cut aerial parts, meaning leaves, stems, and flowers, or a tea of just the flowers, which I like much better. 1 dessert spoon per cup. You steep 10 minutes, 1 cup after meals. Decoction of the root, 1 dessert spoon per cup. You boil it 2 minutes. You steep 10 minutes, 3 cups a day between meals. Dr. Leclerc, another great practitioner, recommends 5 to 6 grams of the crushed roots for a 200 milliliter cup of hot water. That's about 7 ounces of water. These quantities are given for when you use the plant alone. If you use it in a tea or tincture blend, the dosage would be different and you would need to adapt it to the blend and the situation. In terms of precautions, there can be allergies to the plant. French references mention that allergies are rare with the native species, but more frequent with the garden varieties. That's interesting. The roots can be irritating to the digestive tract, as I explained, since it is very rich in saponins, and that can cause nausea and diarrhea if you take too much of it or if you have a very sensitive digestive tract. And that's everything I have to share about cowslip. I hope you'll run into it at the bend of a path, in the cool of the understory, and maybe at that moment the plant will offer you a few of her very pretty little flowers. Don't forget to send her your gratitude. Thanks for being here. I will see you very soon for the next episode of The French Herbal.